Michael Jackson was in the middle of Earth Song when he spotted something in the 8th row that made his heart stop. A woman was holding up a photograph, crying silently as spotlights illuminated her face. Michael stopped mid-verse, his voice trailing off as he stared at that photo. The band continued playing for a few seconds before gradually falling silent. What Michael saw in that photograph would lead to one of the most emotionally devastating moments in concert history, and prove that sometimes the deepest connections happen through shared grief. It was November 14th, 1996, at Madison Square Garden in New York City. Michael Jackson was performing the North American leg of his History World Tour, and the arena was packed with 20,000 fans who had waited months for this moment. The energy was electric, the production was spectacular, and Michael was in peak form. He had already performed Billie Jean, Smooth Criminal, and Black or White. Now he was deep into Earth Song, that powerful anthem about environmental destruction and human suffering that had become one of his most emotionally charged performances. But what nobody in that massive arena knew was that in row 8, seat 24, sat a woman who wasn't there to celebrate. She was there to say goodbye. Sarah Mitchell was a 42-year-old hospice nurse from Brooklyn, New York. She had been working in palliative care for 15 years, helping terminally ill patients find peace and dignity in their final days. Sarah had chosen this profession after losing her younger sister to leukemia when Sarah was just 19 years old. That loss had shaped everything about who Sarah became: compassionate, present, and deeply committed to making sure nobody died alone or unloved. 3 weeks earlier, Sarah had been assigned to care for a new patient, Marcus Thompson, a 67-year-old jazz musician who was dying from stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Marcus had been given 2 to 3 weeks to live, and he had no family. His wife had passed away 5 years earlier. His only son had died in a car accident in 1989, and he had no siblings or close relatives. Sarah was essentially the only person who would be with Marcus in his final days. During their first meeting, Sarah noticed something unusual about Marcus's small apartment. Every wall was covered with photographs, newspaper clippings, and memorabilia of Michael Jackson. There were pictures from every era of Michael's career: the Jackson 5 Days, the Thriller phenomenon, the Bad Tour, everything. Marcus, despite his pain and weakness, lit up when he talked about Michael Jackson. "That man saved my life," Marcus told Sarah one afternoon as she was adjusting his medication. "I was at my lowest point in 1983. My marriage was falling apart. I'd lost my job, and I was seriously considering ending everything. Then I heard Billie Jean on the radio, and something about that music, that voice, it reminded me that beauty still existed in the world. I went to see him perform at Madison Square Garden that year, front row. It changed everything for me. It gave me a reason to keep going." Over the next 2 weeks, as Marcus grew weaker, Sarah spent hours listening to his stories about Michael Jackson, how he had attended 9 different concerts over the years, how he had written letters to Michael, thanking him for the music that had literally kept him alive, how his dying wish was to attend one more Michael Jackson concert, but he was too sick to leave his bed now. "I just wish I could tell him," Marcus whispered one evening, his voice barely audible. "I wish I could tell Michael Jackson that his music didn't just entertain me. It saved me. It gave me 30 more years of life that I wouldn't have had without him." Sarah held Marcus's hand as tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. "He deserves to know that he mattered to someone like me," Marcus continued. "Not just as a fan, but as a person who literally owes him his life. But I know that's impossible now. I'll never get to tell him." On November 12th, 1996, Marcus Thompson passed away peacefully, with Sarah holding his hand. His last words were, "Thank you for the music, Michael. Thank you for everything." After Marcus died, Sarah couldn't shake the weight of his final wish. This man had spent his last days wanting to express gratitude to someone who would never know he existed. The unfairness of it haunted her. She kept thinking about all the lives Michael Jackson had touched, all the people he had saved without ever knowing it. The next morning, Sarah made a decision. She went back to Marcus's apartment with permission from his landlord and took down one photograph from his wall. It was a picture of Marcus from 1983, standing outside Madison Square Garden after his first Michael Jackson concert. He was young, smiling, alive with hope. On the back of the photo, Marcus had written, "The night Michael Jackson saved my life. November 18th, 1983. Sarah discovered that Michael Jackson was performing at Madison Square Garden on November 14th as part of his history tour. She used the last of her savings to buy a ticket. Row 8, seat 24. She wasn't going for herself. She was going for Marcus. She was going to hold up that photograph during the concert and somehow, impossibly, try to communicate to Michael Jackson that he had saved a life, that his music had given a dying man 30 extra years. When Earth Song began, Sarah knew this was her moment. The song was about loss, about suffering, about the pain of the world. It felt appropriate. As Michael sang the powerful lyrics about what we've done to the earth, Sarah stood up and held Marcus's photograph high above her head. She wasn't screaming or trying to get attention. She was just standing there, tears streaming down her face, holding this picture of a man who had died 2 days earlier, with gratitude on his lips. Michael Jackson was in the middle of the verse, his arms spread wide, his voice soaring through the arena, when his eyes landed on Sarah. At first he continued singing, but something about her caught his attention. She wasn't screaming or jumping. She was just standing there crying, holding up a photograph of a smiling man. Michael's voice began to falter. He kept looking at Sarah, at the photograph, at her tears. Then something unprecedented happened. Michael Jackson stopped singing mid-verse. His voice just stopped. The band, confused, continued playing for a few more seconds before they too began to slow down and eventually fall silent. 20,000 people fell into shocked silence as Michael Jackson walked to the front of the stage, his hand shielding his eyes from the spotlights as he stared directly at Sarah in row 8. "Ma'am?" Michael's voice came through the sound system, soft and uncertain. "What are you holding?" The entire arena was silent now, everyone turning to look at Sarah. She felt frozen, terrified, but she kept holding up the photograph. "It's a picture," Sarah called out, her voice breaking, "of a man who wanted you to know that you saved his life." Michael stood at the edge of the stage, completely still. "Can I see it?" he asked quietly. What happened next took several minutes and became one of the most intimate moments ever witnessed at a major stadium concert. Michael's security team, understanding that something important was happening, helped Sarah make her way from row 8 to the stage. The crowd watched in respectful silence as this ordinary-looking woman in hospice nurse scrubs climbed the stairs to where Michael Jackson was waiting. When Sarah reached the stage, she was shaking so badly she could barely stand. Michael took her hand gently and led her to the center of the stage. "Show me," he said softly, gesturing to the photograph. Sarah handed him the picture of Marcus Thompson standing outside Madison Square Garden in 1983, young and full of hope. Michael stared at the photograph for a long moment, then turned it over and read the inscription. "The night Michael Jackson saved my life. November 18th, 1983. "Tell me about him," Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper, but carried throughout the arena by his microphone. Sarah took a deep breath. "His name was Marcus Thompson," she began, her voice steadier now. "He was a jazz musician. In 1983, he was going through the worst time of his life. He had lost everything and was planning to end his life. Then he heard Billie Jean on the radio, and something about your music gave him hope. He bought a ticket to your concert that year, and it changed everything for him." The arena was completely silent except for Sarah's voice. "Marcus lived another 30 years because of that night. He got his life back. He fell in love again. He made beautiful music. He found joy. And he never forgot that it was your music that saved him. He attended 9 of your concerts over the years. Every time he said it was like going back to the night that gave him his life back. Michael's hand went to his mouth. Sarah could see tears forming in his eyes. 3 weeks ago, I became Marcus's hospice nurse, Sarah continued, her own tears flowing freely now. He was dying from pancreatic cancer. His last wish was to attend one more of your concerts, to somehow tell you what you meant to him. But he was too sick. He died 2 days ago with your music playing and your name on his lips. His final words were, "Thank you for the music, Michael. Thank you for everything." Sarah's voice broke completely. "I came here tonight because Marcus never got to tell you. He died wanting you to know that you didn't just entertain him. You saved his actual life. You gave him 30 more years, and he was so grateful." Michael Jackson stood on the stage at Madison Square Garden, holding the photograph of a man he had never met, a man who had died thinking of him, a man whose life had been saved by music. And then Michael Jackson did something that shocked everyone. He sat down on the stage floor right there in front of 20,000 people, and he cried. Not quiet tears, not dignified performer tears. Michael Jackson sat on the stage and sobbed. His shoulders shook, his hand covered his face, and for several minutes, the king of pop grieved for a man he had never known. The arena remained completely silent, 20,000 people witnessing something sacred and heartbreaking. Sarah sat down next to Michael on the stage floor and put her hand on his shoulder. They sat there together, 2 strangers united in grief for a third person who had connected them through music. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Michael lifted his head. His face was streaked with tears, his makeup ruined, but his eyes were clear. "I never knew," he said, his voice breaking. "I never knew that my music could do that, save someone's actual life. Marcus deserves to be honored. Everyone like Marcus deserves to be honored." Michael stood up, helping Sarah to her feet. He turned to his band, whispered something to his musical director, then turned back to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael said to the crowd, his voice thick with emotion, "I want to dedicate this next song to Marcus Thompson, a jazz musician from New York who couldn't be here tonight. But he's here in spirit, and his story reminds us all why we're really here. Music isn't just entertainment. Music is survival. Music is hope. Music is life." What followed was the most emotionally charged performance of Man in the Mirror that anyone had ever witnessed. Michael sang it while holding Marcus's photograph, and at the chorus, when he sang, "I'm starting with the man in the mirror," his voice cracked with so much raw emotion that it felt less like a performance and more like a prayer. But here's where the incredible part of this story truly begins, the part that nobody in that arena could have predicted. As Michael sang, Sarah noticed something extraordinary happening in the crowd. People were holding up their own photographs. Hundreds, then thousands of people, all pulling out pictures from their wallets, their phones, their pockets. Pictures of people who weren't there, people they had lost, people who had loved Michael Jackson, people who had been saved by music. Michael saw it too. As he sang, he looked out at an entire arena full of photographs, an ocean of faces of people who existed now only in memory but who had been touched by music, saved by music, given hope by music. When the song ended, Michael stood at the center of the stage, surrounded by 20,000 people, holding up photographs of their departed loved ones, and the arena erupted not in applause but in a collective catharsis. People were crying, hugging each other, sharing stories with strangers about the people in their photographs. After the concert, Michael spent 3 hours backstage with Sarah. He wanted to know everything about Marcus, his favorite songs, his life story, his final days. Michael made a promise to Sarah that night. He would never forget Marcus Thompson, and he didn't. For the rest of the HI Story Tour, Michael kept Marcus's photograph on his dressing room mirror. Before every show, he would look at that picture and remind himself why he was really performing. At the end of each concert, during the final bow, Michael would hold up that photograph for just a moment, a private tribute that most audience members didn't understand, but that meant everything to him. But Michael did something even more profound. He started the Marcus Thompson Initiative through his Heal the World Foundation. The initiative provided free concert tickets to hospice patients and their caregivers and created a program where people could submit stories about how music had saved their lives or the lives of their loved ones. Over the next decade, the initiative collected over 50,000 stories of people whose lives had been changed by music. Sarah Mitchell and Michael Jackson maintained a close friendship for the rest of Michael's life. Sarah became an advisor to the Heal the World Foundation, helping to connect the world of hospice care with the healing power of music. She helped establish music therapy programs in hospice facilities around the country, all inspired by Marcus Thompson's story. When Michael Jackson died in 2009, Sarah was one of the speakers at his memorial service. She stood before millions watching around the world and told the story of Marcus Thompson, of that November night at Madison Square Garden, and of how Michael had honored the life of a man he never met. Michael taught us all that our lives matter, Sarah said through her tears, that our stories deserve to be heard, that music isn't just sound, it's survival. Marcus Thompson knew that. Michael Jackson knew that. And now we all know it too. Today, there's a small plaque at Madison Square Garden that reads, "In memory of Marcus Thompson and all the lives saved by music, November 14th, 1996. But the real memorial to Marcus isn't a plaque. It's the thousands of hospice patients who have since been able to attend concerts through the Marcus Thompson Initiative. It's the music therapy programs that now operate in hospice facilities worldwide. It's the understanding that music does more than entertain us. It keeps us alive." Michael Jackson kept Marcus Thompson's photograph until the day he died. It was found among his most precious possessions at Neverland Ranch, tucked into a journal where Michael had written, "Today I learned that I saved a life I never knew existed. Marcus, wherever you are, thank you for reminding me why I sing. Thank you for giving my music meaning beyond what I ever imagined. Rest in peace, brother. Your life mattered. Your story mattered. You mattered." The story of Michael Jackson, Sarah Mitchell, and Marcus Thompson reminds us that we never fully know the impact we have on others. Somewhere right now, someone's life is being saved by a song. Someone is finding the courage to keep going because of music they heard on the radio. Someone is discovering hope in 3 minutes of melody and lyrics. Marcus Thompson was just one person, but his story represents millions of untold stories about the power of music to literally save lives. Michael Jackson stopped his concert that night because he saw a photograph. But really, that photograph helped Michael see something much more important, the invisible web of connection that exists between artists and the people whose lives they touch. Sometimes we save each other without ever meeting. Sometimes a song can do what medicine cannot. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is simply to let them know that their life mattered. Marcus Thompson died wanting to say thank you. Sarah Mitchell made sure those words were heard. Michael Jackson made sure they were never forgotten. And now all of us carry that story forward, a reminder that music is more than entertainment. Music is hope. Music is healing. Music is the reason some of us are still here. Subscribe to hear more untold stories about the heart behind music's greatest legends. Share this video with someone who has been saved by music. Leave a comment about a song that gave you hope when you needed it most. Because every story matters, every life matters, and sometimes, just like Marcus Thompson, we need to make sure the people who saved us know that they did.